Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Get Pairing. This is episode number 22. We're going to be smoking the Wildfire B-Sides. We'll get you all the info about this cigar when we get back from our short little break. But for now, grab yourself a cigar, grab yourself a drink. Let's get pairing. Hey everybody, welcome back. All right, welcome to Let's Get Pairing, episode number 22. This is Wildfire Cigars B-Side. As always, I'm your host Trip here from the Casa de Monte Cristo Studios, along with my co-host Dennis. As always, Dennis, how are you doing on the porch of sadness this evening?
The porch of sadness, I can tell you, for those of you that have been following the story and are dying to know what has happened to these wonderful adolescent maggots that have been under my porch, well, you'll be happy to find out that they have all grown up, they've graduated, they can all fly now, which means every time I come home and I try to open my damn door, it's like I'm going into Beelzebub's cave. So
I wish I had a good comment for that, but I don't got shit. I don't know.
whatever died though doesn't smell anymore. So I'm thankful. They did a
Well,
great
that's
job. Proud of them.
At least, I mean, I'll take flies over the smell, I think, right?
Yeah, agreed.
I think.
It could
I
be
mean, it's
worse.
still kind of a toss-up, but you know.
Yeah, man.
All right, and while you're getting lit up, we are smoking the Wildfire Cigar Company B-Sides tonight. So Wildfire Cigar Companies was created by Jeremy. I always want to call him Jeremy Caldwell. Jeremy McDonald, who was notably Caldwell's national sales manager since before the company actually started selling cigars. In 2021, he left and he created his own company, Wildfire Cigars. B-Sides is an interesting one because the B-Sides is, of course, he has kind of all of his limited editions are what's the word I'm looking for? Inspired by music. So he had the first one was the single, then came the intro, then this year the hook, and this one the B-Sides are coming out. And then I think the breakdown is the next one. So the B-Sides is connected to the single. So the kind of inspiration here is that the B-side is the flip side of the single in record terms. So this has taken the blend of the single, but swapped the wrapper and the binder positions and made some adjustments that are unspecified to the fillers.
Well, just so it burns properly.
Yeah, I would think so. But I think that's always kind of an interesting experiment to flip the binder and the wrapper and see what happens. So in this case, the wrapper is Ecuadorian Habano seed. I would call that a Maduro or at least a dark Habano because it's pretty dark looking. The binder is Mexican San Andres, and the fillers are grown in Esteli and Jalapa, so all Nicaraguan for the fillers. Dennis, I know you just lit this cigar. Any thoughts yet, or should we just wax on for a little bit?
Listen, let me tell you about the toothiness of it. Toothy not in the bumpy sense, but toothy in that like it sticks to your finger with the little bit of sandpapery grit.
Mm-hmm.
Very fine tooth rather than.
It reminds me of like a velvetiness almost.
Actually, that's a great way to put it. It's a very finer velvet-like kind of tooth to it, which I thought was really cool.
Or like a really fine sandpaper. That might be.
Or very fine sandpaper. Yeah. It smells fantastic.
Yeah, and it's tasting good so far too. I forgot to mention this is made at Hoya de Nicaragua. Good friends of the show and friends of ours, and they make some great cigars. They only released 500 boxes of this, so if you're on the hunt for it, try to get yours while you can. And the price point is $15. Also, I forgot to mention the size: 7x48, classic Churchill. How do you like this size?
I was gonna say, man, I not always a Churchill person. Rarely, but I feel that over the last year or two, I've been kind of leaning a little bit more toward the Churchill size.
Hmm.
And honestly, sometimes I don't. And I know this is a no-no. It's like big industry no-no. I'm going to get banned. Sometimes, if I'm busy working, I'll light up a Churchill and I'll kind of like put it down and I'll light it up again. But I will, before I put it down, I will retrohale it and then cut it.
Purge.
Then, well, sorry, purge. Thank you. I
I
do
just want to make
retrohale.
sure it's clear for people and they're not
I do, yeah. So I purge it out. So
before
if
you get
there's
lit up in the comments.
it, yeah, I don't want to get lit up. Not tonight. Tonight's not the night. Tomorrow
Yeah.
night, you can find me, between here and there. You can find me in that street corner. I'll be over there. Um, yeah, man. So I purge it out and cut it and go back to it. And I just kind of like that format for when I know I'm gonna put a cigar down and I know I can go back to it and it won't be awful.
Hmm.
Certainly not amazing as it would have been, by itself burning through one shot, but
Yeah. I've found that over the last few years, I've started to really like Churchills for a different reason, and I think it's that I sometimes smoke while I'm working. I I just tend to, if I'm smoking a cigar, I just commit to whatever amount of time it is, right? Like I don't tend to run into a cigar where I'm like, oh, I gotta put this thing down, even though I'm only halfway done. Once in a while that happens, but not usually. Just kind of the way I schedule my cigars, I guess. But I've found that I really like the evolution of a Churchill. That like starts off kind of smooth and elegant and lighter bodied, and then over the course of the cigar, it ramps up and up and up. At least usually.
I think it's also Churchill's a really great size for someone who's still trying to figure out their palate and try to understand those nuances in a cigar where on a smaller format cigar or maybe even a larger ring gauge, sometimes those changes from uh to your point, right? A little more elegant nuance to fuller bodied. Some of those changes get lost for people and they go, well, I don't know, it tasted like kind of like smoke and a little bit like tobacco, and that's fine. The
Yeah.
Churchill makes it a lot easier to approach and kind of break it down in thirds.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I had never thought of it that way. And another plus of the Churchill is that Churchills just tend to smoke kind of cooler. It's harder to overheat a Churchill if you're smoking a little too fast.
Oh boy, let me tell you about overheating a Churchill. It will, you're right, absolutely, especially the way that I smoke, it will go out before I overheat it.
Hmm.
It'll automatically cut me off without completely going to shit, which is another nice benefit of the Churchill if you are a faster smoker.
Yeah. As far as flavor notes, I'm digging this cigar so far. It's got a little bit of like an earthy, chocolatey kind of vibe with a little bit of I don't know, a little bit of sweetness that I can't quite put my finger on, so I'll just call it chocolate for the moment. Um, and then there's like a really nice floral kind of component to it.
Yeah, man.
And then just a nice small amount of like black pepper, spicy spice. Very light on that spice, but it's definitely there.
It's that chocolate. It's like that sort of like a wafting of chocolate where you want more. That's what I'm trying to put my finger on, that flavor where I really dig it, but I want more of it. So I'm trying to smoke faster to get it. But it's a very subtle, kind of light, airy flavor to it.
Yeah. Michael King says he was just having the same discussion with somebody today. That personally he gets a lot more nuance out of less than 50 ring gauge cigars. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Just something about a long, skinny cigar that makes good things happen, right?
I love that size. I mean, the ring gauge, I'm a big fan of. I'm slowly getting back into Churchills and I think more people should.
I think, see, my thing is if I'm smoking a Churchill, it's almost always going to be like a 47 or a 48 ring gauge.
Yeah.
I don't like to do like a 7 by 54 or something like that.
60, 7 by 60.
No, I'm not into that, man.
Like that. And that's totally okay. Everyone's got their own thing.
Next week, guys, we'll be smoking the Resonator from CAO, the 8 by 80. Not really.
I thought you were going to say lunatic because I'm sitting on a lunatic and
that's coming up someday as a goof.
we can do it. It'll be a long show, but we can do it.
We're gonna have to I'm gonna have to take vacation time from my family for that show. like put in for PTO in order to do a 7-hour show?
7 hours? I'd probably knock that out in 3.5.
I don't know. There's one way to find out though.
That's true.
Uh, I was gonna say tune in on April Fool's Day, but I don't want to commit to anything that we're not gonna make happen and confuse anybody. All right, so let's get on to some pairing here. I'm very curious to see how this cigar pairs, because it's just got some very different flavors to me for an Hoya de Nicaragua cigar. My first pairing, I don't have a lot of notes to talk about because I just went in and made a cocktail and then realized I even made the wrong cocktail. So this is an old fashioned. I just thought an old fashioned, a little bit of added sweetness I thought might work well with this cigar. I had meant to make it with mezcal, and then I set it down on my desk here and went, well, I was supposed to be mezcal, but it was bourbon. So in this case, I made it with my second pairing of the evening, some Elijah Craig's small batch, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a little bit. But first, I'm gonna take a couple sips of this old fashioned and let you talk about your first pairing.
I'm excited about my first pairing. I actually haven't gotten a chance to take a sip of it. Let me see now.
It's always interesting, right?
Well, I've had so much of it. I'm really familiar with the flavor profile. I'm a really big fan, but I haven't had it with this cigar specifically. I've had it with a couple of cigars here and there, and I wasn't sure where it sat, so I wanted to give it another shot. So what I'm drinking tonight is, there's a label. Check that out. So 3BR Distillery, 3 bottles of Riot from Keyport, New Jersey, and this is their kind of agave tequila adjacent spirit. And you can check that out. Batch number SP5 comes in at 40%, which is cool. I think this is a very old batch, actually. I have to check in with the guys. Great dudes over there, man. We became friends with them some time ago when they first launched in 2021, shortly after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I should have mentioned also the name. Sochny. Sochny is, it's like I say juicy, right? It's like in Russian, you say this is juicy. It's got full it's flavor. It's got that mouth feel. It's that thing we talk about that coats your palate.
Okay.
Like full palate experience, which, compared to, let's say, like a really sharp cask bourbon, it may not always do that. Sometimes it'll hit that one spot in the back, and that heat from the alcohol will kind of wash over, and that's it. This is a lot softer, and I think 40% was a really great way to go with this. So this is made also with hops and orange peel.
Interesting.
A little bit different, man. And I say tequila adjacent because, as you know, and for those of you that don't know, you can't call it legally tequila unless it's made in one of 5 regions in Mexico. I will spare you the list of those 5 for butchering the names because
so you could call it a tequila style spirit, right?
It's a tequila style spirit. Yeah, it's tequila inspired. They call it, I believe on the bottle, they say it's an agave distillate, which is reasonable. I mean, I think, but we all know effectively, like, look at that. It's a little darker too, which I love.
Yeah. Do you know if it has any barrel time?
No barrel time as far as I know.
Okay. So it's just kind of infused with those flavors, and that's what's giving it the color.
Yeah, so I'm suspecting that color, that slight little bit of straw in there, is coming from the hops.
Yeah, that was going to be my guess.
I haven't asked them. If I did, I probably forgot, but I haven't asked the guys what the process is. Maybe they're doing a basket.
Yeah, that's what my assumption always is that you're doing a vapor infusion.
Oh.
It's pretty uncommon for professional setups to do an actual like steeping infusion.
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't see a whole lot of large scale or professional distilleries doing steeping.
I think my guess is just that it's inefficient, right? Like some of those liquids are getting soaked into the media, whatever it is that's in there, the fruit or whatever, and then you throw it away. So,
It's a waste product. It's just the logistics of when you're distilling at scale and you want to make a large batch. It's just a lot of shit to move around at the end of the day.
yeah, exactly. When you're doing for a bar, it's fine. But when you're doing it at a large scale, I don't think it makes sense because there's so much lost volume. Good evening, Sam. Thanks for watching, brother. We
Sam.
appreciate you. What was I gonna say? Oh, I was gonna talk about my old fashioned.
Yeah.
Um, I made a good old fashioned, like just eyeballing it. A couple dashes of bitters, a little bit of simple syrup. You can't really see it on camera, but there's a slice of orange peel in there, and then
I
some
do have one
whiskey.
question.
Go for
It's
it.
a very important question. You made your old fashioned, right?
Yes,
You do the cancel stir?
of course.
Because I think that's the ultimate flavor,
The flavor
right? Like,
enhancer, right?
that's the flavor enhancer. You got to use the finger, man.
You swirl it with the pinky. That's the ultimate cancel way, unless he's feeling self conscious about last time he washed his hands, and then
And then he uses his fist.
and then he uses.
Oh,
No, at Lazona Palooza last year, he wouldn't stir it with his pinky. I was surprised.
interesting. Well, it is a rare treat, I think, for those of us that have experienced that magic.
Yeah. But anyway, the sweetness of the old fashioned is actually working really well with the kind of savoriness, I guess, of the cigar. The cigar doesn't have a ton of sweetness. It's very light in sweetness for me. Um, and I think the sweetness of the old fashioned is actually working really well with that. How's that funky agave nectar stuff?
I think it's
Hops.
playing off of the sweetness really, really well because initially the sweetness was very intense, and likely this is we're talking from the jalapa. More likely than not, that's coming from the jalapa, and I think the little bit of the bite is doing a really nice job of cutting through the sweetness and sort of leveling out the cigar.
Nice. Um, I'm trying to think of what flavors notes to give for this cigar, but it's like
It's tricky.
black pepper and earthy chocolate. Those are the two things that I taste the most right now.
Marzipan? You
Yeah, a
getting
little bit of some kind of nuttiness, I guess.
nutty, like almond, very light, subtle. The floral thing is really interesting too.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah. I still
can't
get a
believe
little bit of that floral, but it's kind of gotten lost, I think, in the stronger flavors of the cigar at this point. Sam says he's smoking a La Roma de Cuba with a
Yeah, man.
Varsteiner Dunkel. My man,
Yes.
love me a Varsteiner.
Always good. Those are great any time of year. Big fan.
Mm-hmm. I love their beers. All right, so on to my next pairing. Sorry, I had a burp that almost came at me there.
It almost killed you.
Almost got me. That was the big one. I'm drinking Elijah Craig Small Batch. So Elijah Craig is a brand of whiskey that was introduced in 1986 by Heaven Hill Distilleries. The namesake Elijah Craig was a Baptist preacher in the mid 1700s. In somewhere in the 1780s, he founded a distillery. Now, the legend says that in the 1790s, there was a distillery fire. Some of his barrels were damaged by fire and charred, and he was too cheap to buy new ones. So he flipped the staves inside out and put the barrels together that way and shipped some whiskey to New Orleans. And by the time it got there, it had taken on the dark amber color we all love today, and it tasted amazing. And they called it bourbon. Unfortunately for that story, the the earliest reference that can be found to charring barrels by anybody was in 1826, which is about 30 years after they claim that happened, and about 20 years after Elijah died. So it's unlikely that it actually happened that way, but it's still a good story.
Yeah.
I just thought that was funny that there's actually for once like kind of proof to refute the story on the back of the bottle. Not that it's actually on the back of the bottle here, but you know.
Yeah, usually the stories in the back of the bottle, like, this one guy, Bob, could totally validate this, like, right, all the history, but Bob is dead, so Bob can't, like, tell you what happened. Trust us, this thing, like, absolutely happened. The bourbon was found in a cave deep underground, and it was amazing.
In an old pirate ship.
In an old pirate ship that was transported by some peg leg guy named Huey Roberts or something. Yeah.
Man, we got to make a whiskey and come up with a crazy story like that. That would be
I think
fun.
what we need to do is an episode on the crazy stories of whiskey.
That's a great idea, actually.
Wildest
Just kind of
stories.
collect some of the wildest
We
back of
can
the
uh,
bottle kind of stories that people
we can
claim.
call it Wild Wild Whiskey. How about that?
Yeah, and we could do a cover of Wild Wild West by Will Smith, but
We should.
whiskey
We
themed.
should. Little music video.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Um, all right. So with the whiskey, on the other hand, it's only been around for about 30 years now. Oh, 40 years almost. God, we're old. Um,
Yeah, we're old, man.
getting there. So this once had an age statement of 12 years. In 2016, they changed it from Elijah Craig small batch 12 year to just Elijah Craig small batch. They removed the age statement, kind of to extend production. The less you're aging your whiskey, the more you can roll out the door you can turn it around faster, right? I think the plan is to someday um, put the 12-year back on because, to be honest, I think they can charge more for that.
Yeah.
Like if they just came out with a 12-year small batch now, I bet people would pay an extra $30 a bottle for it, right?
Yeah, easily.
Just because it has an age statement. But what they say is that the two reasons for this change are that they are now blending a blend of 8-year-old whiskeys and a blend of 12-year-old whiskeys together. But the more interesting thing that I found is these small batches they ain't so small, dog.
Never are.
The small batches initially, up until 2016, they were 100 barrels at a time that would be vatted and bottled.
Oh, just 100 barrels?
And they've just crept that a little bit up to 200 barrels at a time.
Nobody will notice.
Yeah.
Limited edition is available everywhere, man. It's crazy. What are we doing?
Yeah. As with pretty much everything from Elijah Craig that's not cask strength, this is 94 proof. Another interesting thing that I read about this is that if you want to do a barrel select for Elijah Craig, the only options they give you are the 12-year small batch, 94 proof. That's it. Nothing else. All you get is small batch, 94 proof. You don't get to do cask strength or anything like that. I just thought that was kind of an interesting that they have this weird little rule, and that they're apparently very strict about it.
There's always a weird little rule, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
It's always that thing of like, oh, hey, we forgot about this. Oh, by the way, there's a little thing now. It's good for marketing for sure. Listen, and again, like you said 8-year and 12-year, right? Blending those together. There are people out there that will say, wow, man, 20-year whiskey, that's great. That's not
not quite.
And it's okay. It's not to shit on people that don't know. It's just sometimes you go, I bought this 20-year-old whiskey. I'm going to sit on it for 20 years. It's going to be 40 years old, just because they don't understand the aging process, the barreling process. Once it's out of the barrel, that's basically it. It's kind of falling apart after that.
Yeah, there will be flavor changes over extended periods of time by evaporation, but there's no aging happening.
Unless you, let's say you're using a natural cork and your bottle is clear and that clear bottle is sitting in the sun for 10 years.
Yeah, then you'll have I would call it degradation rather than aging or oxidation.
Oxidative aging, we'll call it. Maybe that's the next thing we start doing with whiskeys.
There we go. We leave it on a windowsill for 6 years.
No, not just any windowsill. On someone's grandma's windowsill. Like, grandma's windowsill always had
aged. Grandma aged. That's the way we sell it. Aged exclusively by grandmas.
Made by grannies, aged by grannies, consumed by grannies.
It's funny that we were talking about this the other day. I was at Corona Cigar in Sarasota here. I told my father-in-law to go to one of the ones up in Tampa a couple weeks ago, and he loved it. So we decided to just kind of meet up. And we were talking about, they have on their whiskey list, they have a couple of crazy rare bottles. There's like a Johnny Walker or something from the 40s. that you can
Jeez.
buy for like 6 or 7 grand for the bottle. Um, and I was just joking about it. He's like, yeah, but they don't age in the bottle. And I said, but that's not what you're paying for. You're paying for, like, you could taste what whiskey tasted like 95 years ago. How cool would that be?
Let's listen. Let's be real. These guys that are out there buying Pappy from 20 years ago for, whatever, $1,000 a bottle, whatever the number is.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to a couple of guys that have had Pappy and that are decently well versed in spirits, and like you would trust their palate, and they just went, yeah, man, this tasted like piss. It wasn't special at all. And that's
I
fine. And
mean,
that happened.
I don't think any of it, I don't think there's, I mean, I can't say that because there are whiskeys that I've tasted and been like, oh my God. But just because it's rare doesn't make it that, right? Like,
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely a fair statement. Should have started with that.
because I have had a couple whiskeys that were like, I tasted it and I was like, my life will never be the same.
I have one and I can't find the name of it. It was a corn-based whiskey from like Illinois, I think. I think from Illinois.
I don't know.
Maybe it was from Michigan.
Michigan. The one I can think of is a legendary to me Japanese whiskey. Chichibu the Peated. I think it's by Ichiro's. But Chichibu the Peated is one of like the greatest whiskeys I've ever tasted.
No, it's not definitely not Mr. Chishibu.
I tried to get a bottle of it a few years ago, and they were very difficult to find. There's only been 1 or 2 releases, and
Listen,
it's not easy to find.
you
But
too
I
can
found
have
some in a bar, and I
Yeah.
snagged some there.
Oh, you told me about this. Yeah, I remember now. Yes. It's $669 a bottle, excluding tax.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Fantastic.
After it came out 5 or 6 years ago, probably 2017 or so.
You know how much Old Granddad you could get for $669?
That's a good point. That's a real good point.
You get a whole lot of mums.
Sam and Rob say that, or no, sorry, Michael and Rob say that Imperial Stout might go with this cigar. I have something that may go well with it. We'll see. Coming up next, Dennis.
They might be on
second pairing of the evening, because we went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
Sometimes it's fun. I like these tangents, man.
Oh, Michael's got a great idea. Ma Kettle's whiskey. Picture of a grandma sitting on a front porch in a rocking chair with a corncob pipe.
Fuck yeah, man.
That's the way to do it. That's how you sell whiskey, brother.
You know what? For some strange reason, my head went to a grandma sitting in a rocking chair with corncob pipe in front of a barrel and churning the whiskey as if it's butter, just to aerate it for the aging process.
Yes. Churned by grandmas.
Churned by grandma. Listen, so this is coming from a very interesting place in my journey of Europe, in my journey of Amaros, in my kind of exploration of all this stuff. I got my hands on some stuff a while back, and I think we did it on the show once, and I got another version of it from my parents, thanks to my parents for the bottle. But this comes from a place called Latvia. Do you know where Latvia is by any chance?
Vaguely. I know it's in Eastern Europe. That's as far as my knowledge goes. I know I do have a friend who's Latvian by descent.
I will tell you that is Northern Europe, technically.
Okay.
So imagine Finland is at the top, right? Under Finland is Estonia. Under that is Latvia. And under that is Lithuania. So it's kind of a little sandwich between Lithuania and Estonia, but it's touching the side of Russia, right? Just for everybody to get on the same page, same country. Fuck, I had a point. What was my point? Oh,
probably something about what you're drinking, but I don't know.
Yeah, let me pull up my notes and I'll tell you a little bit more about this stuff. It's pretty cool. And let me show you the bottle, actually. Wait, where's my? Here we go. So this is called Riga Black Balsam. Not Balsac, but Balsam.
Like balsamic vinegar?
Well, it comes in a bottle that looks like balsamic vinegar. It's like a little ceramic bottle. It's nice and slender and cool. So Riga is the capital of Latvia. And this is their black currant edition. So this is 30% alcohol. It's black currant edition. What the hell is a balsam? So balsam is The Latvian version of what we consider an amaro, classically Italian, but many cultures, many countries have herbal spirits that are generally pretty bitter, have a mix of different things. So this one has 24 different ingredients: herbs, roots, berries, a couple essential oils, which is interesting, not common, and of course, closely guarded secret. Nobody knows about this thing. There was a pharmacist in 1752, hence the 752 on the bottle, that came up with this thing. Abraham Kunze, I guess. And originally it was medicinal. Like a lot of amaros start being very medicinal only things, where your
Yeah.
grandma says, you got a stomach ache, drink this thing, or after a heavy meal, right? It's
I mean,
used as
yeah, that's really the origin of these types of beverages,
oh,
drinks,
man.
concoctions, whatever you want to call them. They started as medicine, right? I mean, there was a point where whiskey was considered medicine. There was also a
It
point
was
where cocaine and morphine together was considered medicine.
mixed with whiskey. Yeah. So yeah, somebody was like, hey, this is kind of interesting. Let's turn it into a thing that we do for cocktails. And in Latvia, this is their national thing. Like, we talk about Campari, we talk about Fernet. People are really very proud of those things. We talk about Jägermeister, very, common thing. Most of us have had it at some point. Look how dark that is, by the way. It's when they say black, it is fucking
I
black,
mean, it
dude.
looks almost purple to me, just like off
Oh,
the
yeah,
edge of the reflection looks a little bit red tinted.
a little bit. Yeah. Well, yes, actually, it is. You're right. It is red tinted. Like this is the kind of stuff, if you spilled on something, it would stain it for all of eternity.
Yeah,
So what they do is they take basically a neutral spirit. They make a vodka, um, and they take all the other things. They soak it in the vodka and put it in barrels to age. And what ends up happening is you get this. And what they do with it, traditionally, they'll have it in coffee, sometimes tea. So I suspect the ones
really.
that are flavored, like the black currant, there's another flavor, I think is raspberry. They put these in the tea because it is a little sweet, bitter, and sour, almost like a twangy balsamic vinegar, to your point earlier.
Hmm.
The regular one, I had it. I told you, this is the Amaro that I thought I finally found an Amaro that I can't drink. 2 bottles later, we made best friends. It's fantastic.
That's kind of how it goes with Amaros. You never, well, I can't say never, but you rarely like the
Rarely.
first sip of an Amaro.
Exactly, it's so complex. There's so much going on that it takes a little time. It takes maybe a little ice or a little water.
Yeah,
Your palate has to process this wildly different thing that you've never had before. That reminds you of, the smell of a wet barn, after a thunderstorm for some reason or
and it's
whatever.
and it's more sweet and more bitter than anything else you've ever tasted.
It's cloyingly sweet, and
Like
the
that's
bitter
how some of them are.
puckeringly bitter. This flavored one is 30%, but typically the regular unflavored comes in at 45.
Wow. Okay.
So it is like Fernet plus territory, right? Fernet coming in at 40. Although I've heard Fernet there is like a 43 or 45% Fernet locally in Italy.
Wow. I mean, that would kind of make sense. I know there are some, there's a lot of spirits around the world that are different proofs in different countries, a little higher, a little lower. I know
Yeah.
I've seen some whiskeys that are like 40% in the U.S., 43 in other countries. I know that Florida Caña, I believe, is 35 in Nicaragua.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a little lower.
So,
And that's just every country has different laws around spirits
yeah, very true.
or alcohol in general, I should say, not just spirits.
Uh, for this Elijah Craig is just like a classic uh, bourbon, like right down the middle bourbon. It's affordable enough that it works in a cocktail or it works by itself. Um, to me, this is one of those whiskeys that's like in the Goldilocks zone, where like I could buy a bottle of this and not be mad when my friend comes over and has a
Okay.
whiskey and Coke. Um, but then I can also make an old fashioned out of it. I can also have it neat, or I can give it to somebody on the rocks. It's very versatile like that, and I think a bottle is around $30 or $35, which I think is the right um, the right level for a whiskey that you're going to be both sipping and using in cocktails.
I think
Right.
this is what we're seeing. I've seen a trend that I've talked to a lot of people. I always talk to people, but like when you're sitting down, you're chatting, you're having a cigar, whatever, you talk about whiskeys, spirits. I've noticed an interesting trend, not even with younger people like you and I, but guys that have been drinking whiskey for like 60 years,
Mm-hmm.
saying they're going for whiskeys now instead of chasing these rare cask, whatever crazy things. They're going for whiskeys that are a little bit more affordable, more available to find. And generally, instead of going cast, they'll go bonded. And they'll go like, you know what, this $25 thing bonded is great. You can drink it straight. You can drink it in a cocktail,
Yeah.
and it's affordable enough where you can share and still have a good experience.
Yeah, exactly. And that's right where this fits in for me. It's one of those whiskeys that's good enough on its own, but cheap enough for a cocktail.
The tides are turning because I remember a time when I started getting into bourbons and learning about it and talking to people about it. I remember there was this very much intense air of, no, man, you got to go for that crazy thing.
Yeah.
It was like Pappy, and this was back when Blanton's was just, it was like, yeah, it's all right. Blanton's is fine. I'll pay $65 a bottle. It's a little expensive, right? And then that boom happened.
Mm-hmm. And now
So I
people are
think
paying $200 for it. It's wild.
$2.99 by me.
Oh my god.
And they
People,
they
stop it.
moved those bottles, man.
Stop buying them.
They're feeding
Um,
that.
yeah. See, my goal has always been for a long time. Like we're talking at least 10 or 15 years. My goal has always been find the best, cheapest, most widely available whiskey. Right? Like, oh, I turn off my video. Um, well, and Elijah Craig was one of those first bottles that I found. That's like, wow, this is affordable and fantastic. One of the other ones I found, and I'm sure you'll remember this because I featured it on the show 6 or 7 years ago, was Weller Antique.
Oh yeah,
There was a
yeah.
time when I could buy a bottle of Weller Antique every day of the week for $25.
It's fucking,
And
it's
that
unreal.
time is
Absolutely unreal.
long gone now. Now you can't find it fucking anywhere. And they doubled the MSRP to try to get people to stop buying it. And it didn't work. So it's very difficult to come by these days. I do have a bottle right now that I had to hunt down a while ago. Um,
I, I would be fascinated to see a market that what happened with wine in the what was it like in the teens, somewhere late teens, 2000s, where wine counterfeiting was a big deal, and there was
mm.
obviously a documentary came out about that. It was really interesting. But I wonder if we're going to start seeing that a little bit more on the spirit side,
Oh, I mean, it's definitely been happening. There
on a
was,
larger scale, like massive. There's obviously in the small circles,
yeah,
the rare collector circles, that happens, but the consumer circles, the actual the mass public, I'm fascinated to see if that's something that might happen.
it could. I mean, there was, I'm trying to remember, there was a documentary about it. I can't remember if it was an episode of a documentary or a whole documentary on like Netflix or something. It was about these people who were stealing. They were somehow getting a hold of legitimate Pappy Van Winkle bottles,
Oh, that was the
and
Hype series,
yeah, that's what it was. Yeah,
Bourbon
um,
Hype. Yeah.
yeah, that's what it was. They stole a whole bunch, and they were selling counterfeit bottles on the black market. And it took a long time to track those mofo's down.
Yeah, arguably some of those bottles are still out there, which is funny because the market is like, yeah, we want these. We want these. It's a collector's item now.
Yeah. Michael says Ben Holiday bottled in bond is a great example of what we're talking about. They've been gaining popularity, and he's hoping prices don't skyrocket. I mean, that's always the problem. Like that's what happened to me with Weller. Is like I found it and I was like, oh my god, this is the best $25 whiskey I've ever had. Unfortunately, the rest of the world thought the same thing and bought all of it. Um, Old Overholt is his favorite sleeper, which we're big fans
Yes,
of. Um,
massive, massive. That
Old Overholt is
Granddad
great.
bonded. I love the bonded stuff. Overholt bonded also is fantastic.
Yeah. Um, I think we're at a point with whiskey now where it seems like the bubble is starting to not pop but relax a little bit. Like the volume of decent whiskey on the market now is much higher than it was 5 or 8 years ago. So it seems like it's starting to equalize a little bit. At the very least, you can still find really good whiskey at a reasonable price.
Thankfully, yeah. And we're
Thankfully.
seeing, to the point of these guys, right? These 3BR guys that yes, it's not whiskey, I realize, but these are young, very young guys that got into distilling that produced a a great, fantastic business with so many different expressions and so many different things that traditionally people were not aware of, not used to. Things, distillates that are made out of peas completely, right? And
Yeah.
other ingredients. And now we're seeing younger people with different approaches coming into the industry and changing things up where for the last, I don't know, 150, 200 years, it's been exactly the same.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll see this happen with Scotch. Maybe it'll be a little bit of a slower roll on, but it might happen.
That would be nice. Yeah. Man, it would be really interesting if like a bunch of new Scotch distilleries started popping up. But we'll talk about that some other time. I want to know how your balsam
Oh, let me tell you
is
about my
going with
ball.
this cigar.
Oh, I put it in coffee, by the way, the other day, last week, I think. And you got to really love it to drink it in coffee because goddamn, that hot coffee brings out all of that bitterness.
Mm-hmm. I
Imagine
could see
putting
that.
regular Fernet, not the mint Fernet, but yeah, it intense. With the cigar, I think it's going really well. But again, it's the sweetness. It's the fruit flavor from the black currant, which is nice. And as an Eastern European, I really enjoy black currant. It's underutilized in the US
Yeah.
as like a, hey, this is a common flavor ingredient. People go, what the fuck is a black currant? It seems weird. But yeah, I think it's going really well with the cigar. And now that I'm smoking a lot faster and getting through it pretty good, the sweetness is cutting through some of that. I don't want to say bitterness, but um, some of the intensity of the cigar as it's ramping up the spice, if you will.
Yeah, I'm really finding still that the having a sweet pairing, like Elijah Craig is a fairly sweet bourbon.
Oh yeah,
Obviously, making an old fashioned out of it is even sweeter. Sweet works really well with the cigar, like those spice, that earth, that like I talked about how there's chocolate, but it doesn't really feel like sweet chocolate. It's like when you take just a little tiny bite of that like 98% chocolate that's like it's so intense it makes your head want to explode, but there's no sweetness. That's what it reminds me of a little bit. Just like not that intense, but like that kind of chocolate flavor is what I'm talking about. Again, I'm like I get real specific with my pairing notes sometimes. But I'm gonna move on to my last pairing of the evening. Somebody mentioned stout, which this is kind of in a nice middle ground.
oh
Uh,
baby.
this is Guinness Foreign Extra Stout.
I like how you say it's a nice middle ground. That's a stouty stout
It's
if
a
it's stout
it's a
out there.
very intense stout, yes. But you know, it's not 11%. It's like it's 7.5%, which is
It's
just
not a
barely an imperial stout, right?
just agreed, just barely. It's certainly not like a double chocolate German Black Forest
Yeah,
cheesecake imperial stout aged in
I do
like
have
20
one of those over there in the fridge if you want to try it.
Prairie Bomb.
No, it's
Oh,
I think I still have one. Yeah, I do. It's Patriarchy from Dukla.
fucking great
It's
beer,
their
man.
German. It's like German chocolate cake with
Yeah.
raspberries or something like that.
So
It's
that's
crazy.
that's the one that was on my mind actually.
Well, that's why I was like, you're describing the exact one that I have
Oh, I
right in front of me.
love go with this one because I know it really well and I personally I think it's going to go great with the cigar.
I think it's going to work really well with the cigar. The bitterness and the sweetness, I think, is going to work really well. So Guinness, just a quick overview on Guinness. They were started in 1759. They famously had a 9,000 year lease agreement for the 4 acre property that was only 45 pounds a year, which probably started off pretty expensive in the 1700s, but would have been very cheap these days.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they outgrew that and eventually negated that lease to expand the facility. Um, they merged with Grand Metropolitan to form Diageo, who we know from owning
Legendary.
almost every Scotch distillery.
But
Man,
not
there's
fucking
something.
they don't
Oh,
they don't fuck them up.
that's true. They don't fuck them up. They just let them do their thing until they stop making money, and then they get rid of them or whatever. But Um, as long as Diageo is hands off most of the time, we're okay with it. It has been speculated that Diageo will exit the beer business, meaning they would sell off Guinness. So if you're looking to buy a beer company, maybe
Oh
call up
fuck me.
Diageo.
I I hope InBev does not buy it. I just it's gonna break my heart if it
I think
happens,
it'd be
man.
too big for them. Um, yeah, Guinness is brewed, meaning actually made in over 150 countries. Um,
Yeah, man.
the U.S. is one of the few where we don't make our own Guinness. I think because we're picky about it. Um, we import all of our Guinness from Ireland. But in Africa, almost every country in Africa has a Guinness brewery.
Guinness is
And
huge in Africa, man.
yeah, over 40% of all Guinness sold is sold in Africa. Like 40% of the stuff with a Guinness label on it is sold, made and probably sold in Africa. I should say sold and probably made there.
Most likely, yeah, it's probably made.
So originally this was called Guinness West India Porter, and it was made for exporting into the Caribbean. Um, the first time I think it was exported was in 1801, and it was essentially they were making a very strong, almost beer concentrate uh, that they could ship from Europe to the Caribbean, so that all of the Irish workers there could have beer that they're familiar with. So in order to do that, they upped the alcohol, they added extra hops, they put them in wooden barrels for the journey, and by the time they got there, they were delicious, and they would sometimes be bottled locally. They would sometimes be mixed with beer that was brewed locally and then bottled. It was kind of like a choose your own adventure kind of thing back then. These days, for an extra stout is just kind of a stronger stout. Um, it's still available in the Caribbean, um, but these days in the Caribbean, China, uh, or sorry, Asia, pretty much all of Asia and pretty much all of Africa, they're using a syrup that is made by Guinness,
Yeah, man. It's
packaged,
wild.
shipped to these places, and then they have a brewery there that ferments the syrup that Guinness made back in Ireland, which I just think is such a weird and hilarious concept.
It's
I
it's
love it.
amazing. They are doing the Coca-Cola thing, which we know Coca-Cola took over the world at some point after their war with Pepsi. They took over the world
Yeah.
with syrup distribution. That was the big thing because you can send that syrup to anywhere in the world, and even if you piss into the syrup and mix it with piss, it'll still taste like Coca-Cola.
hmm
That's the beauty of it. You can take
But
that same product and it'll taste exactly the same
I can
anywhere.
tell you, my wife would know the difference. She is the pickiest person I've ever seen. Like if somebody makes her a soda at a restaurant and it comes out, if the mix is off at all, or their gun is fucked up or something, she calls it out the second it hits her mouth. Like she is
You can,
so on
yeah.
point about it. It's crazy.
That's actually it's funny you say that. If I walk into a bar and I order a Guinness, I can tell immediately if the line's been filthy and hasn't been cleaned. Like there are Guinness bars that are
hmm
mandated that if you advertise Guinness and you become a Guinness bar and you get a discount on a bunch of
Oh,
kegs of
really?
Guinness, you absolutely have to maintain your lines. And they also have reps that go out, regional reps that go out and actually will check. And they'll tell you a little bit how to sell the Guinness, how to talk about it,
How to
how to do
pour
a
it?
proper pour, very important. So there's a lot of cool stuff about Guinness, but funny thing reminds you of maybe Catherine the Great and the story of Russian Imperial Stouts. They made it
I'm not sure
hoppier,
I know the story.
stronger. This was an experience that happened where they were like, well, fuck, we need to send this beer that they, long story short, really liked this thing. It was a very far away land, from England to Russia, long journey. They didn't have cargo ships and planes back then, right? Loved the beer, ordered it. They sent it over. The beer sucked. And they were like, well, fuck, all right, we're going to make it stronger, add more hops to protect it, to make sure that it doesn't go stale in the journey. And eventually we became to know this as Russian Imperial Stout. Slightly different than
Ah.
foreign extra stouts. Um, and the difference there is not just the hop profile, which is subtle, but the difference there is the malt base.
Yeah, I know Russian Imperial Stouts tend to be much sweeter than this.
Yeah.
This is very, very intense on the hoppy side, but it's not as malty as a Russian Imperial Stout.
Let me just show you this thing right now. Like I could, this is a prison shiv.
Yeah, you could shiv somebody with that burn cone.
This thing, man. That's, that's amazing. Very impressive. This is, I mean, after I ashed all over my computer as I always do.
Man, I mentioned going to Corona the other day. I ashed on myself 3 times while sitting there in one cigar. Like I was smoking the cigar and I would be talking, and then all of a sudden, plop. I just kept not paying attention to it. So over the last few days, I've been paying much more attention to my ash.
The best thing is when I get on an airplane, I open my laptop and I turn it on, the fan just super loads the MacBook, right? So
And then it goes,
fan turbocharges and then it spews as it gets hotter. It spews this like the scent of just the stench of cigar throughout the whole fucking plane.
that's
And people
awesome.
around like, is there a fire? Is something burning? It's fantastic. Very interesting to see.
Oh, Michael King has a good question. I'll get to it in 1 second. I just wanted to finish talking about my foreign extra stout. So this is 7.5%, as I said before. That's a little different because it varies by country because, they ferment it themselves. In some places, they're fermenting it themselves and then mixing it with local beer. And it makes me really curious about next time I'm in the Caribbean, I'm going to order a foreign extra stout at a bar
It's going to be lower alcohol.
and see what it's like. I'm just curious what it tastes like, man. If it's like mixed with some, I don't know, Barbadian cream ale or something like that.
It'll be in bottles. They almost always well, actually, no, they do bottle locally in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
They use glass bottles for almost everything. Yeah, fair point. Okay,
So I'm curious.
we'll stand down.
Michael King has a really good question. He says, InBev, Diageo, Molson Coors, Suntory, Constellation. At what point do you think we'll reach a monopoly in the beer and spirits market? It's interesting because I feel like this is one of those things where when we start getting close, which I think we kind of have been in the last few years, to these companies being big enough to buy each other, the markets crash. And a lot of these companies are not doing as well as they were a few years ago. So they are no longer looking to buy as big as they were before. And we've seen like Constellation is one of the ones that we've seen sell a bunch of brands off. I think InBev has as well. Diageo not as much, I think, because they're so heavily invested in the liquor business, and Suntory.
It's the cultural growth of the particular thing, and so beer versus spirits, specifically whiskey, is going to be culturally in, let's say, in Europe and Scotland, Ireland area.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a little different. I don't know. It's an interesting thing because at the end of the day, you really need the consumer. You need the consumer and the word of mouth and people to really, you could produce a bunch of shit. No one's going to buy it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
No.
Is I don't know how a monopoly would do, to be honest. Like, as we talked about a few minutes ago, Diageo generally has a very hands-off approach. They buy you, and then they collect a paycheck, and just sit back and relax, and give you trillions of dollars worth of marketing power.
It's almost like those muscle men in the Italian neighborhoods that, hey, guess what? There are 60 pizzerias in one small neighborhood of Brooklyn, but you know where they're all getting the same dough from? This one guy, Tony Baloney, that lives down south somewhere. And he's like, listen, I'm going to give this thing. You're going to give me a cut. I'm going to give you a cheaper dough. And it's going to be consistent. You don't have to make a dough in house. Fuck, it makes sense, right? But then what happens when this guy's pizza tastes like that guy's pizza? And now you're fighting. And
that's the thing we have to worry about. Yeah.
I think, another way to look at it is from the perspective of the cigar industry and shelf talkers and shelf space. And, if you have a monopoly pushing out small distillers from having an opportunity to market their product at a distributor or at a retail shop, that's going to prevent a lot of new growth. You have to go through, this new monopoly to get permission now to start making or producing whatever it is.
Yeah, and the beer industry is the same way. Sam Finnell says microbreweries keeping them in check is why we're not worrying about a monopoly right now, which I completely agree with. Microbreweries, they're not doing as well as they were 10 years ago.
No, not at all. It's amazing.
they multiplied too fast, right? They bred too fast, and they
Or they
reached
bread.
critical mass, and now we're seeing over the last 3 or so years a lot of breweries closing, which sucks. I just saw that shit. What's the name of the? There's one in Dallas. Oh, Deep Ellum. Deep Ellum is not closing, but they have closed their tap house officially, um, because it's expensive and they're not getting the business they used to, which is that's happening with tap houses all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, but I do still think that most consumers these days are focused more on what beer they're buying and where it comes from than they are with the macro brews. There's always going to be people who drink the macro brews, but I think over time there has constantly been more people going towards microbrews, which is definitely keeping those bigger breweries in check.
Yeah. And it's a slow growth, sure. Again, it's hard as a smaller business to do it, but then again, the price of raw material, just getting your hops now is so much more expensive than it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Getting grain is more expensive. And the other problem is when you have somebody like InBev buying, well, they use rice, bad example, but you have people buying a bunch of hops, and now you need those hops as a small brewery. You can't buy them unless you buy whatever an exorbitant amount of those hops at one time. You're not going to use. You
I
can't
mean,
use
it's
them.
it's the broadleaf problem, right?
It
Like
absolutely the broth.
transfers directly to the broadleaf problem.
Absolutely, it's
Um,
wild.
One more thing before you go on to your next pairing. Rob wants to know: have you tried Cape May King Porter Stomp on Nitro yet? I've never heard of it,
I
but
have not. I haven't been to Cape May. I haven't been there in a year or so. The last time I was there, they had this fantastic fucking chocolate covered pineapple beer that was I thought it was gonna be shit.
oh, that sounds delightful.
It sounds like it could be awful and it's going to taste like urine, but it was fantastic and I loved it. I haven't tried that yet, but I am planning a trip to go down there. Actually, what I usually do is I go down to Cape May Brewery, and then I go to all the breweries on that. I forget what the road is, but I stop by like 5 or 6 breweries on the way home.
Nice.
Yeah, man, I got to try it.
All right, what's your last pairing of the evening, Dennis?
Speaking of New Jersey, I got this really cool beer. So I had this on the show not long ago. This is Axe and Arrows Sour to the People series. They're
Oh yeah,
cranberry apple. You might remember that. This is an imperial sour, so it's actually at 7.5%. And check out that label, man. I know I always show off these labels. I've had a bunch of different Sour to the People beers. They're super cool, man. They started in 2019 in Glassboro, New Jersey, which is basically it's a college town. And they kind of had this the theme that they have is really like Magic the Gathering. They used to have Magic Nights. I think they brought them
oh yeah.
back recently, but when I started going there, they used to have a card for every beer that was their like little flavor text, if you will, about the beer, what it's all about, and it looked like a Magic card, like Magic the
That's
Gathering.
awesome.
It was
That's
very
awesome.
cool. I haven't seen those in a while. I don't know if they still do it, but I purposely picked this, knowing the the agave spirit is going to be interesting, but then the sweetness from the balsam. I wanted to cut through that, especially in the final third of the cigar. And it's very just it's light drinking. It doesn't taste a whole lot like cranberry or apple or anything. It just tastes like a nice sour. But because it's a little bit stronger, I think it sits really well with kind of the intensity and the spice of that cigar. This cigar, I should say.
Hmm. Sounds
So I want to
sounds
do
like
a
it goes
little
pretty
palate.
well.
It's more effervescent too. So that was part of the other reason. I wanted to scrub the palate a little bit and be able to go back through my pairings and see kind of how they match up.
Yeah. Um, I know. I think the last time I had this foreign extra stout on the show was the Foundation Pasquale, I believe.
Oh, I like that
Um,
cigar a lot.
Great cigar, but I thought this beer trampled it. Um,
Yeah, I remember that now.
Completely the opposite case with this cigar. This cigar is going really well with it. Kind of like we talked about before, that sweetness off of the pairing just brings out so much in the cigar. Um, like this cigar loves a sweet pairing, whether it's as I've had a cocktail, something fruity like what Dennis had, or a strong stout or a sweet whiskey. Um, all of these have worked really well with this cigar, I think.
I've been surprised as well. I think my pairings have been all very nice with the cigar. And also talking about the cigar a little bit, I was surprised by I thought it was going to be a lot more intense all around. Just really punchy, peppery, just very strong based on kind of the velvet tooth on it, the knowing a little bit about the background, where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Generally, if you just go do a visual check and Hoyt Nicaragua's darker cigars, we'll just say darker, we're not talking about tobacco specifically, they tend to be kind of punchy.
Yeah.
They've got that intensity that's very classically Nicaraguan that and I'm a huge fan. I know you're a huge fan of them. I love what they do. And it's got that like the body of Nicaragua. And this is that nicer, more subtle version of that.
Yeah. But to that point, I think it is ramping up at this point. Like I've just hit the point where the lower band was, the secondary band.
And that's the magic of the Churchill too.
And it
Where
started getting a little stronger.
Yeah, you have these distinct parts that are very interesting and they're noticeably different as they transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a good cigar, man. I'm really enjoying it. I think the pairings really kind of make it sing. Let me go back through my pairings here.
Now, question for you: if you weren't having an alcoholic pairing, what do you think would work for you with this cigar?
Something a little on the sweet side. Um, I could see black coffee working with it as a much more complementary pairing. Because it has a lot of the flavors in this cigar remind me of like a black coffee, right?
Thinking about the Yirgacheffe?
Yeah, like a Yirgacheffe, and that would add a little bit of that fruitiness, a little bit,
Yeah,
just a hint of sweetness. That's not, there's no sugar in that, but you get like a feeling of sweetness from it, I guess, right? Um, I'm trying to think of what else I could pair it with. Um, Something like a soda, I think would work really well with it. Actually, that effervescence, that sweetness, um, really anything with sugar, I think would work pretty well.
yeah, yeah, man. Same.
Any specific highlights on your mind for it?
Uh, I would do a Gosling's ginger beer.
Oh, a
I think
ginger beer
that
might
might
be
work
good.
nice. A little bit of spice from that might be nice.
Surgeon and I were just talking the other day about how ginger beer pairs great with some cigars. Ginger ale, not so much.
No, no, no. You need the spice from the ginger, really.
Yeah. I'm trying to decide what my pairing of the night is. I gotta taste the whiskey.
God, dude, I'm sitting outside while my office and studio are out of order, and I'm feeling like it's Nicaragua.
I'm seeing the sweat, dog.
I'm distinctly feeling like that night with Caldwell at Drew Estate, man, sitting outside at night with just dripping sweat, trying to
Yeah.
smoke a cigar and hope that it
Trying
doesn't
to
like
smoke your 14th cigar of the day.
yeah, well you're feeling it, your body's kind of buzzing a little and you're at that point being in the sun all day, it's just you're fucking fried,
Mm-hmm.
man. That's how I'm feeling right now.
All right. Well, we won't make it too much longer then, because I don't want to. I don't want you to fall to the maggot pile on this
Oh god.
episode.
They're waiting for me.
Yeah, they're waiting down there. They're just waiting for more food. So we'll wrap it up in a couple minutes. I definitely recommend you go check out the Wildfire B-sides.
100%.
I really enjoyed this cigar. I think more than most of the stuff I've had from Wildfire, and that's saying something because I've definitely enjoyed all their stuff. To me, this is a little stronger than most of their cigars. But to
Agreed.
Dennis's point, it's not too strong.
What's what was the MSRP on this again?
$15.
All right.
Which
Hey,
is
15 bucks Churchill.
yeah, limited edition Churchill. I
Not
think
bad
that's
at
pretty
all.
reasonable.
Yeah. So what's your pairing of the
Pairing
night?
of the night. I'm bouncing around between Elijah Craig and the Guinness. I think I'm going to go with the Guinness. Mostly because the Elijah Craig is one of those bourbons that pairs well with pretty much anything. This Guinness is kind of hard to pair with, I've found. But it's working real well with this cigar. It just really meshes with those flavors. There's a lot of sort of a contrast pairing, but with flavors that really match up Like they go like this. They just fit right together. That sweetness, that bitterness, that spiciness, that savoriness in the cigar. Um,
Like a glove.
like the glove. What about you? Did you already
If I
say
had
yours?
so no, not yet. Pairing of the night, right? Generally, this is when I approach it, I think of a pairing that if I only had this one thing, would it work with the cigar for the entirety
Yeah.
of the cigar? And while I enjoyed all three pairings, I think that I'm gonna pick this agave spirit.
Socially.
Worked fantastically well. Enough flavor without taking away from the cigar, and a little bit of that bite that cut through parts of the cigar really nicely. Some of the sweetness.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, man, shout out to the guys in Keyport at 3BR. Another great thing they made.
Nice. Um, and shout out to Jeremy at Wildfire. Good job on the
Yeah,
cigar.
man.
All right, it's time for our one for the road, where we tell you about some kind of media we've consumed in the last week or so. Um, Dennis, you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
Yeah, why don't you go first? I'm curious what you got this
All
week.
right. This week, um, I mean, I watch a lot of horror movies. It's just about always going to be a horror movie when I do this, just because that's the way my brain works. I watch a lot of horror movies. But a new one that I've been looking forward to hit Hulu this week. The First Omen. Um, this was I expected a shit show going into this movie. I did not have high hopes. I thought the actress in it was really good. It really had the feel of an Omen movie. There were a lot of shots, especially in the first act, that called back to the Omen. And then it ends with kind of a twist and a setup for reimagining the Omen universe. So I think we're going to see a some kind of version of the Omen remake come out soon in the next few years. That'll be a sequel to this. But I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. I had very low expectations, and it was great.
Man, Omen's coming back. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is pretty cool. I'm going a little bit different route. Things that my normal. If the few times I get a chance to really like sit down and consume, whether it's read something or listen to something or watch, very rare times I get to watch like an old movie. I got a movie that's deeply kind of special to me. Is an old science fiction film. You may remember it, where every restaurant is a Taco Bell and it's the fanciest place in town. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
1993's Demolition Man. Fantastic, weird, crazy. I don't even know how to tell you. It's science fiction with some comedy to it, a bunch of action. Wesley Snipes, Sylvester Stallone, Sandra Bullock's in it. Uh, there are other people in it that if you haven't seen Demolition Man, I'm not going to ruin it for you. Don't look at the cast. There's some fun characters.
Yeah. I love that movie, man.
Just every time I watch it, it's a fun movie and it's ridiculous. And every time I watch it, it's kind of like as we're in 2024 now, as we're getting to the setting of the film, which is 2032,
Yeah.
when they get they're cryogenically frozen, they get unfrozen. I'm feeling this thing. Like we're getting to the point. Like self-driving cars, yes, check. Uh, Taco Bell's a fancy restaurant. Have you been to the Dominican Republic? Because hot damn, people wear suits to Taco Bell in the Dominican Republic. That's the
Yeah.
place you go. So we're getting there. And I should have mentioned his character, Sylvester Stallone's character, was initially frozen, jailed in frozen cryogenic state for manslaughter.
Man's laughter? What?
Laughter. You know the word manslaughter?
Yeah.
You'll never read manslaughter again the same way. Look at it. It looks like man's laughter.
I've never heard that before, and I love it. I thought it was gonna be a misspelling in the movie that you were getting,
No, there are tons of those.
because there is a movie misspelling that I always think about, and it's a movie that almost nobody has ever seen, called
Oh,
Metropolis. Have you ever heard of it? No. It's the first
like a
science.
Superman
It's
themed porno?
no. It's the first science fiction movie. It came out in, I believe, 1932.
Interesting.
Might have been a little earlier than that even. But it's the original science fiction movie. The special effects in it are crazy because
Practical.
they were practical, but they were so far ahead of their time. Like they had these sets that were uh, they would have like they would do this thing with a mirror where they would have like a mirror so that they would have the set reflected in a mirror from a miniature, and so it looked
Uh,
like you were standing in front of all these giant buildings when you were actually
Holy
standing in
shit!
front of an empty wall. It's a
I'm
crazy
looking at
movie.
I'm looking it up now. 1927.
27.
Holy
Okay.
crap! This is wild for 1927, especially given the times. This was like a little too progressive for most people back then.
Yeah, it was crazy. But the thing that I always think about that movie is in I think it must have been sometime in the early 90s because I know that it was on the cardboard slip cover. Like you know those VHS tapes that have the slip cover that goes over? Um, it said Metropoils on the side. They misspelled the name of the fucking movie on the side of the sleeve. And so for like 10 years, every copy of this movie said Metropoils on one of the sides. And it's just hilarious to me. Somebody pointed that out to me when I was a kid, and I've never stopped thinking about it. Imagine being the guy that misspelled that too.
Yeah, well, it happens.
Anyway,
I mean, what's a moil between friends?
exactly.
Jewish listeners will know exactly what I'm talking about and probably giggle.
All right. So sorry for the seventh tangent of the night. Go watch Demolition Man. Learn how to use the three seashells.
Oh, the three seashells, the best.
Uh, thank you everybody for watching. We'll be back next week with another episode. We're trying to locate a box that was sent to Dennis to find out what we're smoking next week. So Dennis will get on that at some point this week, and we'll figure out what we have and try to post the show in advance. But we don't always do that. Still, we'll be here. We'll be fucking around and having fun. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for doing all those dumb things that every YouTuber tells you to do. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us for an hour. And check out the Wildfire Cigar Company. Great cigars.
Hell yeah, man.
Any other closing notes before you hit him with the catchphrase, Dennis? Or you just
Digging it,
wanna
man.
do the catchphrase thing.
We're good, man. Thank you everybody for watching and listening. Remember, we want you to drink better, but we want you to drink less.